So space.com reports that NASA has looked at this 3I Atlas, of course, and it's confirmed that it's just a run-of-the-mill comet. So there's all this speculation that given that it's an interstellar object, that it's a space probe, that the light that it emits is unusual. These types of things are really interesting because it's an object that we have tracked that, and 3I stands for third interstellar object. It's only the third one that we've tracked so far. And these are interesting because it might give us just a little window in what other solar systems are like. Maybe water is not as common, maybe it's more common. Maybe there's a different metal composition in other solar systems, because as stars form, as I'm sure my audience knows, we're all smarter than average, I think. You have a matter that condenses, and in the center of this, it condenses into a star. And you still have matter that, I guess, accretes around it, if that's the right word to use. But that depends on what's around, like what is around this star formation. It depends on what kind of elements are there. So it depends on, what kind of supernova or two white dwarfs that, combined or whatever that cause a supernova to produce the nebula. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist. I do read up on this stuff because I think it's fascinating and it's interesting to speculate on, but I don't really know the math very well, so I'm not an expert in this. But I do study a lot of things in nature, and I would imagine that this interstellar object, although it is rare to find, is probably not a rare occurrence. These types of things probably happen a lot more often than just 3 times that we've been able to track such objects. And the reason why is you have to put this into perspective. A comet or an asteroid is the size of, smaller than a mountain on Earth. And how big is our solar system? It's huge, right? And, finding one of these objects, when you say go through the solar system, it doesn't have to necessarily go close to our sun. Maybe just past the orbit of Saturn, where maybe our sun just kind of, changes the trajectory of such an object. But something like that would be a lot harder to find, given such a small object so far away. These kinds of objects, like I said, are actually probably very common. When stars form, you get little tiny bits of material that get flung out. We have objects in our Oort cloud, most of which, probably have stable orbits, but every once in a while, given that some of these objects orbit once every, few hundred years, and if something else passes by them, all it takes is just, I wouldn't say a chance encounter, but an encounter that that happens once in every so many, maybe billion years or something like that, given how distant these objects are, that it could throw the orbit of something out. It gets flung out. Okay, so these objects are probably very common. It's just that they're difficult to find. And like I said, it's interesting. But just because it's interesting doesn't mean that it's, it warrants a level of speculation, to say it's an alien spacecraft, or, that there's more to it than it's just being a comet. Most likely that's what it is, because like I said, things like that are probably very common. Could an alien race send a probe here? That's pure speculation. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't see any evidence to indicate that is the case.